Hello, dear and beloved ones. Please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Brew some tea or coffee and enjoy watching. Take off that talisman. A piercing cry rang out from an elderly stranger on the street. Before her death, Aline's grandmother had passed down a family heirloom, a vintage silver pendant with an intricate carved pattern. However, soon after, strange occurrences began happening in the girl's home. A gray autumn day shrouded a small cemetery on the outskirts of the city. Sparse raindrops tapped against Alina's black umbrella as she stood there, unable to shake the feeling of loss. An hour ago, the funeral of Varvara Mikhailovna had ended. Not just a grandmother, but the keeper of family secrets, mysteries, and legends. A tall, stately woman with piercing brown eyes, she had always seemed enigmatic. "Alina, it's time to go," her mother, Irina, said softly, touching her daughter's shoulder. "There's nothing more to do here." Alina nodded silently, casting one last glance at the fresh mound of earth covered in wreaths. Already in the car, Irina handed her a small, worn-out box. "Grandmother asked me to give you this before she passed." Inside, on a velvet cushion, lay a massive silver pendant. It looked heavy even at first glance. "Strange," Alina murmured. "I don't remember Grandma ever wearing this." She was an eccentric woman, always believing in legends and folklore. Irina shrugged. "I wouldn't read too much into it." Yet, there was a subtle hint of caution in her mother's voice. At home, while going through her belongings, Alina took out the pendant again and noticed that its pattern wasn't just ornamental. It was composed of strange symbols, resembling runes or ancient script. As she traced her finger over the cold metal, she felt a faint vibration. At that very moment, the room grew colder. Alina looked up, and it was as if she saw her grandmother before her. "Never take off this talisman, do you hear me?" "Never," came a barely audible whisper. Alina instinctively clenched the pendant in her hand, a strange premonition tightening around her heart. Taking a deep breath, she fastened the chain around her neck. The pendant rested right in the center of her chest, chilling her skin. That night, Alina woke with a feeling of unease. The pendant's metal was icy, as if it were absorbing some unknown energy. The room was silent, save for the hum of the old refrigerator. She noticed that the book she had left on the nightstand was now lying on the floor. "It probably just fell," she tried to reassure herself, but an inexplicable anxiety gnawed at her. Soon, the strange occurrences became more frequent. Objects in the apartment shifted places, shadows flickered in mirrors, and at night, a barely audible whisper echoed in the empty room. "Did you hear that?" Alina asked Alexei, her boyfriend. He averted his gaze but looked uneasy. One night, when Alexei stayed over, they both heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Alexei jumped up and turned on the light. No one was there. "It's just nerves," he muttered, though fear quivered in his voice. Her grandmother's words echoed in Alina's mind. Never take off this talisman. But what if everything that was happening was connected to it? In her dreams, a mysterious woman in an antique dress appeared to Alina. Her hollow eyes stared unblinkingly, and her finger pointed into the darkness. Trying to make sense of it all, Alina began documenting the strange events. She photographed the displaced objects and recorded sounds on a voice recorder. She had always considered herself rational, but the pendant seemed to have a life of its own, attracting something terrifying. "This pendant, it's not just jewelry," she whispered to herself, feeling the growing fear. Alexei increasingly insisted that she get rid of the strange family heirloom, but Alina stubbornly continued to wear it. It felt as if taking it off would mean losing her connection to her grandmother forever. One day, walking down the street, she pulled her coat tighter around herself, absent-mindedly touching the pendant. Suddenly, an elderly woman appeared beside her. Her abrupt movements stood out against the city's hustle and bustle. Wisps of gray hair peeked from under her dark scarf, and her piercing steel eyes locked onto Alina. "You?" the stranger whispered, staring at the pendant. "You don't understand what you're wearing." Alina tried to walk past, but the woman grabbed her wrist. The touch was icy, almost ghostly. "Take off that talisman," she commanded sharply. "Before it's too late." True terror flickered in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Alina asked, trying to stay calm. "That pendant is not just an ornament. It holds something that should not be near the living." The woman spoke quickly, glancing around anxiously. "For centuries, your family has kept this secret, and now the burden has fallen on you." Alina struggled to process what she had just heard. Another city madwoman? Or something deep inside her stirred with unease. "Who are you?" Alina asked, but the woman had already vanished, dissolving into the city crowd as suddenly as she had appeared. The only thing left behind was a faint scent of old perfume and the echo of a cryptic warning. At home, Alina examined the pendant for a long time. The delicate silver symbols engraved on its surface seemed increasingly mysterious. Her grandmother had instructed her to keep it safe and never take it off. And now this stranger. She dialed Alexei's number, but he was busy and spoke briefly. He sounded tense after the strange events in their apartment. "Are you okay?" he asked without much interest. "Yes, just a strange incident today." Alina began, but decided not to go into detail. The stranger's words echoed her mind. "He holds something that should not be near the living." Alina realized she had to learn more about the pendant's origins. Perhaps her grandmother's journals held the key to this mystery. But what if it was better not to know? What if some family secrets were best left buried? Before her lay a heavy stack of old, yellowed pages. Carefully unfolding one of the oldest documents, she tried not to damage the fragile paper. The very first pages mentioned her great-great-grandmother, Ekaterina, a woman the family rarely spoke about. Alina had always sensed there was something unusual about her. Now she was beginning to understand why. 1897. The curse won't let me rest. Ever since I received this pendant from my mother, my life has become a relentless nightmare. Ekaterina had written with a trembling hand. A chill ran down Alina's spine. The entries grew more disturbing. Ekaterina described strange occurrences in their home. Unexplained noises at night, objects moving on their own, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of rooms. The pendant is not just jewelry. It is a talisman crafted generations ago to contain a dark force. A small, yellowed photograph slipped from between the pages. It depicted a young woman in a stern late 19th century dress. Her gaze was wary, and in her tightly clenched fingers, she held a silver pendant, identical to Alina's. On the back of the photo, a handwritten note read, "Ekaterina, 1895. Below, in faint, almost illegible letters, "Keep it but do not trust. Protect it but never give it away." The subsequent entries shed light on a long-buried family secret. Long ago, something dark had entered their bloodline, an entity beyond human understanding. The pendant had been created as a magical barrier to contain it. If it falls into the wrong hands, the evil will be set free, one of the final entries warned. Alina's hands trembled. She lifted her gaze and stared at the pendant. It was no longer just an ornament. It was a complex mechanism with an unknown but vital purpose. She recalled the stranger's warning. "Remove the talisman before it's too late." The words now carried a different weight. Alexei, who had been quietly standing nearby, finally spoke. "Did you figure anything out?" Alina nodded slowly. "The pendant is not just decoration. It's protection, and I think I need it now more than ever." The quiet evening in the apartment was turning into a nightmare. A book that had been lying on the table slid off without a sound. A teacup moved toward the edge of the table and then shattered with a piercing crash. A cold dread filled Alina. Alexei had been right, she thought, shivering. He hadn't been able to stand it and had left the apartment the night before, refusing to stay any longer. "This is getting too weird," he had said, throwing the last of his belongings into a bag. The pendant pressed heavily against her skin, as if pulsating in sync with her heartbeat. Alina remembered the stranger's warning and Ekaterina's journal entries about the force that should never be disturbed. But the worst came that night. Around 3 in the morning, Alina woke up with an eerie sensation, like someone was breathing nearby. She wanted to dismiss it as a dream, but the air against her face felt too real. In the darkness of the bedroom, a silhouette emerged, the elderly woman who had warned her on the street. But now, she radiated a cold, ominous glow. "You must take it off," the woman whispered, pointing at the pendant, "or it will awaken completely." Alina tried to move, but her body was paralyzed. The pendant grew hotter, the metal pressing into her skin. Then, a dull thud. Something had fallen. The mirror on the wall cracked. A thin fracture appeared, then spread rapidly, forming a web of splintering glass. Alina screamed, a raw, desperate, animalistic cry. The ghostly figure began to fade, but before vanishing, it murmured one last warning. "Protect your family." By morning, Alina realized this was only the beginning. The pendant was no longer just jewelry. It had become a key to a world she wished had remained closed. She sat on the floor among her grandmother's old documents, her fingers trembling over the yellowed pages. The ink had faded in places, but the meaning was clear. To break the curse, the pendant must be returned to the ancestral home, an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of the city. Around her neck, the pendant quivered ever so slightly, as if alive. It seemed to resist the very idea of being parted from her. "Are you sure?" Alexei's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, tense and anxious. Over the past weeks, he had grown visibly thinner, his face gaunt with exhaustion from the constant unease. "There's no other choice," Alina said firmly. "If my grandmother's writings are true, this is the only way to stop what's coming." Alexei ran a hand through his hair, visibly unnerved. The ancestral home greeted them with an eerie silence. Its wooden walls were cracked with age, the windows half boarded up, though faint, ghostly light seeped through the gaps. With every step closer, the pendant grew heavier. Inside, the air was thick with dust, swirling like spectral shapes in the dim light. Broken furniture littered the floor, along with old photographs, faces blurred beyond recognition. Alina placed her great-great-grandmother's journal in front of her. The moment it touched the surface, a familiar yet foreign voice whispered in her mind, "Don't let it go. You don't understand." Alina froze. Should she continue the ritual, or heed the ghostly warning? Her hands trembled. The candle flame flickered, casting restless shadows on the walls. "Do it," Alexei urged. "We've come too far." But what if this ritual wasn't salvation, but a new trap? Alina looked at Alexei, then at the pendant. One more second, and her fate could change forever. Slowly, she lowered her hands. The darkness retreated. The eerie sounds ceased. A wave of relief washed over her, followed by an unsettling emptiness. The pendant no longer pulsed. Was it over? But then, in the mirror's reflection, her face was smiling. Unconsciously, she ran her fingers over her lips. Her real face remained still, but the reflection continued to smile. A mischievous glint flickered in its eyes, something that wasn't in her own. Alina blinked. The mirror didn't change. Then, a soft whisper broke the silence. Faint at first, but growing, multiplying, filling every corner of the old house. Disjointed phrases wove into a single chorus. Did you really think it would be that easy? The ritual hadn't ended the story. It had only begun a new chapter. Her phone vibrated. Alexei's name flashed on the screen. "Alina," his voice cracked. "Are you okay? Something strange is happening to me." The call abruptly cut off. A shadow flickered outside the window. Alina shuddered. The whispering voices grew clearer, forming a chilling harmony. This is only the beginning. Behind her, the mirror trembled. The darkness thickened.